Hey CrossFit fam. So since we're not allowed in the gym, now is a great time to work on some of your mobility issues. Maybe you're not feeling quite up to doing the workouts at home, or maybe you are still having to work and you're wore out, but you don't want to miss out on some of this time that you would normally, spend at the gym. So let's address some range of motion issues that I know many of you have going on. And so we're going to start with upper body stuff and our wrists. So your wrists move this way, this way, this way, and this way, okay? So that's a great little test to see, and maybe even use a mirror to see how you do in all directions. So a real straightforward one that a lot of people aren't so good at is their wrist extension. So if you put your forearms together, we want to have a pretty flat surface area. A lot of guys out there, I know you're going to kind of be in this little Y position. So we want to be able to work on getting this flat, which has to do with strengthening these extensors, which we very rarely do, except for maybe in our cleans. But also we need to loosen up these flexors from all our gripping and pulling that we do, okay? So we do some great stretches in class, like this one, but it can be a little limiting because we're kind of compressing that wrist joint. So if I close off these bones, that might be something that limits me from having the range of motion, not just the muscle, okay? So here's some other options. If you are unable to get some of this side-to-side movement as well, there are some good ways to work on that too, because if you think about our snatch position, where you've got your wrist kind of out, you need to have that ability to go side to side as well. So first one, you want either your bed or maybe a chair, something where you can get your knee up, and you're going to put your forearm palm up with room for the wrist and hand to move. So from here, I'm going to put my leg on my forearm. And here I can kind of move around, great way to decompress those muscles. I can even move my knee down and get kind of closer to the wrist. And so just think about making circles up and down, maybe spreading and closing the fingers. If you can't get in that position, you can maybe just apply some upper body weight to that and be able to compress those tissues. Also, you want to think about rotation. So we have our wrist joint, we have our elbow joint, but did you know your ulna and radius also create a rotational joint, okay? We need those all the time, especially when we're stabilizing and thinking about breaking that bar. That's rotation in here. Well, if you don't have that rotation, right, sometimes we notice with the front rack position, we can't get that palm all the way down. So a good one for that is grab a pretty heavy kettlebell, and we want to decompress these joints. So I would probably do about a 35-pound kettlebell, maybe heavier. And I just want to be able to let this hang, okay? And what I'm going to be doing is rotating at the shoulder, okay? So I'm kind of holding here, and you can see how much my shoulder rotates, okay? And by having, I can even go a little quick and kind of get some more dynamic movement going in the wrist, okay? And then also from the shoulder, I can do a little decompression by making kind of pendulum movements. I'll show what it looks like here. And I'm going in a circle or I'm going side to side, but I can feel it kind of creating some space in that shoulder joint. Again, what that kettlebell and wrist look like, that's kind of what I'm doing, okay? I'm letting the weight pull all this tissue down, and then getting that shoulder, forearm, and elbow moving a little better. Now let's talk about shoulder rotation, okay? So yes, our shoulder does this kind of thing, but it also rotates, okay? And modern sports science suggests that we have 80 to 90 degrees of external rotation. I'm a little short I would probably qualify as 82 in that position. This would be 90, but if you didn't notice, I actually moved my body. It won't go much further. So you should have 80 to 90 degrees external rotation and internal rotation, which internal can be a little tricky to tell in this shoulder position. A lot of times we see it as coming behind the back, but what happens there is a lot of times the shoulder then wants to dive forward, and we want to minimize that. This should be achievable for everyone. This would be a 90-degree internal shoulder rotation, but to continue working on that, you can work your palm up between the shoulder blades, okay? Again, I'm trying to bring this shoulder socket back and down instead of here, because that's just compensating, okay? So we have our shoulder down for those movements, but we also want it abducted, external rotation, internal rotation. Okay, little limitation in that abducted shoulder position. And then overhead, which can be hard to tell with our arm not bent, right? But to get in this position, you have to have shoulder external rotation. Okay, so thinking about this kind of movement, but you can also think of it as this way. Okay, so we're going to address this position and then also with your shoulder down. All of those, our shoulder obviously goes through all of those positions while we're lifting, and the rotators not only help us achieve different movements, but also help stabilize. So think of your overhead squat when you're breaking that bar. This is external rotation, okay? So if you think of that, okay? So test yourself. 90 degrees should be pretty easy to figure out if you can make a right angle, okay? Now if you can go further back, really you don't need to stretch more than that. And if you have more questions about that, or your shoulder joint is super loosey-goosey, that is probably impacting your ability to stabilize as well. And I would encourage you to reach out to me. Now's a great time. We're doing some virtual consultations. I can't touch you, but I can still talk to you and observe you and give you some feedback and then show you how to work on it from there. So some of you are probably familiar with the sleeper stretch. So you lay down, you have your arm 90 degrees, and we're using my other arm to kind of press this down. It's an okay position, an okay exercise, but if you notice my arm is in front of my body, not next to me. So here's an alternative, is you're gonna put your arm behind your back like we illustrated before and use the floor or a bed to kind of leverage that. So first thing I will do, I will put my arm straight behind me, anchor my shoulder down, and then lay down. So from here, I'm trying to push the shoulder back against the table or the floor, and I'm using my body weight to stretch that, those external rotators that allow me to internally rotate. Kind of sounds backwards. To increase this, I can lift up my hips and press more in with my torso or my rib cage, okay? So you should have very minimal space here. If you're like this, then I would pull your arm out a little bit until you can get your shoulder just about in contact, okay? Like I said, a lot of you will have these limitations for the internal. We don't work on it very much, but it's equally important that you have that movement both ways, okay? So that's a good one for that arm down position. Being here, a good way to do it is to use a kettlebell. So if I was in this extended shoulder position, I could use the weight of a kettlebell and allow it to go down past the surface of a bed or table or even your bench. And you don't want the super heavy one, but something you can manage. So if you let it come down and then maybe use your other hand to bring it back up, you're not going to be super strong in that position. So using that weight to at least create that stretch is another little hack you can do for that internal rotation. Same thing externally. A lot of times you will see this lying on your side, right? So if I wanted to strengthen externally, I would do it like that. But say I want to stretch that way, okay? So with my arm next to me, I can again have my weight here and let the kettlebell or dumbbell pull me off the edge here, okay? So there's room for me to get to that 85, 90 degree range. Again, use your other hand to bring it back up, because otherwise you could be potentially causing issues in that rotator cuff by forcing yourself to lift that weight, okay? From here, again, I can go this way with my weight so that the weight is hanging off the surface, okay? You can do this with bands as well. It's a little trickier because when you're in this position, you don't have any tension pulling your arm down, whereas the weight and gravity will assist you in that stretch for this external rotation. I got one more for you that's great for external rotation. So if you have a broom or a PVC pipe or a dowel rod, anything like that, you are familiar with our pass-throughs, okay? Sometimes we do them very dynamically, which is great, but in this time, when you've got a little bit more time maybe, let's slow it down and look at how we can address our external shoulder rotation. So again, we're looking for that movement. So if I have my arm up here, okay, it's going to look like going back around behind me. So start at the widest spot and get a full grip on here. And what I want you to do, pull that belly button into your spine. You're going to push the dowel rod away from you. Most of you should be good to here. I'm going to continue pushing away, push away, push away, all the way down to my hips. Now here is a killer wrist stretch. Keeping a full grip as much as I can on that dowel rod, that whole line from my pinky finger to my elbow is getting stretched. If that's too intense, just let one hand come off and just focus on the other, okay? Really good stretch here, really addresses the issues that come up from a lot of gripping and also holding our cell phones. So that's a really good stretch, but as we're doing our pass-throughs, we're getting some really good shoulder external rotation. So slow it down, and I want to challenge you to start to bring your hands in closer. Again, keep a full grip so you're not cheating, and think about pushing away and keeping those arms straight. Okay? If you can't do that, it is okay to bend one side and then the other. Okay? But just know, the more you work on it, you're going to be able to move your hands closer and closer in. You can't see it on here, but I've actually made marks where I put my hands. This is where I started with the outside of my hand lining up, and then I made it to here. So those are where those two marks are. It's about 8 inches. So when I was working on this and doing this every day, I made quite an improvement on my shoulder rotation. Pushing away. Okay, so, you know, all kinds of craziness is not a very good movement standard. So use a mirror, think about activating, break that bar and push away from your body as you go down and back. All right, so that will get you started for upper body stuff, working on those rotators, and then range of motion so that you can be more effective when we do get back in the gym. And we're looking at front rack position, also overhead position, being able to stabilize that weight overhead, handstands, all of those things, anything where we kind of have to lock that shoulder into place, those rotators play an important part. So remember, if you have issues beyond this, or you want to get with me, please message me or go onto our website. We have a virtual consultation. and we can get quite a bit done even though we can't touch each other. All right, stay strong.